So hopefully you have a T-chart note sheet picked up. Please label it something like this. It's still in Chapter 6. These are the notes for Monday the 14th. We're going to be solving equations. The book will ask you to solve them either by taking the square root or the cube root or by factoring. So we're going to do a few different problems together. So go ahead and get this first one written down. And when you write this first one down, notice that it only has one variable. It's to the third power. We'll address that, but it only has one thing that has a variable in it. So that means we can separate the variable from the number part and then deal with the exponent. So we're going to start by subtracting 1,000. These cancel, and we end up with x cubed equals negative 1,000. And we want to get rid of the cube, and we're going to do that by cube rooting. That's this function on your calculator, taking the third root, right? And when we do that, the cube root of negative 1,000, that buttons under your math function, number 4, negative 1,000. Now you might think we're not going to get an answer here because we can't square root negatives, but you can cube root negatives. So we do get an answer of negative 10. So the answer to this problem is just negative 10. Okay. Another idea is, we could graph this function and see where it crosses the x-axis. That would be another way to check your answer. The second example, 8x cubed minus 27 equals 0. Once again, we only see one variable, x cubed. So we're going to isolate that, get it by itself. And we're going to do that by adding 27 to both sides. Then we would have 8x cubed equals 27. Then notice in this one that we have a coefficient here, so we do want to divide by 8. These cancel. I'm going to work this way. I didn't leave myself much space. So that would be x cubed equals 27/8. I'm going to go ahead and leave that as a fraction. Once again, I've got a cubed, so I want to cube root that thing. And I can type it in just that way. Math, number 4, the cube root of 27/8. And I get 1.5, which is a fine answer, or 3/2 as a fraction. So x equals 1.5 or 3/2. Same answer, just two different forms. Again, one answer for this problem, like the first example we did. In the third example, this one right here, you're going to see that we have more than one variable. Go ahead and write that problem down. In this problem, we have an n squared and an n. So we can't solve it by this method, by isolating the variable, because we've got two of them. So we have to solve this one by factoring. So to do that, we're going to move everything onto one side. So it's kind of like the opposite strategy. We'd have n squared minus 3n plus 2 equals 0. All right, we factored things like this before in Chapter 6. Remember, a trinomial, if it factors, is going to factor into two binomials. And they're going to both start with n. And remember, we want to think of two numbers that multiply to give us positive 2 and add to give us negative 3. Think about those numbers a minute. And what ends up working is negative 2 and negative 1. Again, I didn't leave myself a lot of space, so I'm going to work this way. If two things multiply to give you 0, then either this one is 0 or this one is 0. And when we finish solving those, we end up with 2 and 1. Two answers. Again, which we could confirm with our graphing calculator, or we could plug into the original and make sure it works. All right, for example, 2 2 squared is 4, minus 3 times 2 is 6, 4 minus 6 is negative 2. And then 1 squared is 1, minus 3 times 1 is negative 3, 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Okay. All right, last example. Again, think about the types that we've done, and think about how am I going to know which way to solve it. So I want you to key on, are there 2 variables or 1? And I hope that you notice there's 1. This time it's n squared. So I can use that separate the numbers and the letters strategy. So I'm going to add 1 to each side. And I get n squared equals 100. And then we want to get rid of the squared. We're going to get rid of a squared by square rooting. Now at this point we got to be smarter than our calculator. We need to remember that even though my calculator is going to give me one answer to this, there are really 2, plus and a minus. Right. So when I square root 100, my calculator is going to tell me 10. And that's true, but negative 10 works also. Think about that. 10 squared is certainly 100, and negative 10 times negative 10 is also 100. All right. So this one as well has 2 answers. So as you do this assignment, watch for what strategy to use. If it has 1 variable, get it by itself and then take the appropriate cube root or square root. If it has 2 variables, move everything onto one side, set it equal to 0, and factor. All right. Your assignment for today comes from page 330, 331, 332, that area, and it's 15 through 20 and 76 through 79. Use your class time to finish that up, check solutions, and turn that in when you're done.